The gaming industry is a dirty town, kid. Rain's coming down hard tonight and the soul of the city's been missing for years. Prices are skyrocketing everywhere, workers are dropping like flies, and every alleyway reeks of microtransactions. This was once a place of art, culture, and self-expression, but that has been long forgotten, faded like tears in the rain. Somebody killed the thing we loved methodically, efficiently, without leaving fingerprints. My name's Cecily. I've been a private eye for long enough to know that every dead body tells a story, and this one, I'm going to solve it, even if I lose myself looking for the way out. There's only one problem. Ask around, you hear the whispers. Some say it was Nintendo who did it because they're somehow evil. Some people say it's deliberately malicious devs who hate the fans, calling it anti-consumer behavior. Some are even naive enough to say it's the woke agenda, whatever that means. But I need to tell you something just between the two of us. The prime suspect is me. I'm one of the 5.4 million people who bought the overpriced Nintendo Switch 2 on launch. I'm one of the 26 million people who actually had fun with the half-finished glitchy crime scene known as Pokémon Violet. The question hanging over the city is simple. Am I the reason games cost $80 now? So, dear stranger online, it's chaos these last few months in the video game industry. If you've been hiding under a rock or just had the good sense to keep a social life under this heavy rain, let me drag you back into the gutter with a quick recap. The Nintendo Switch 2 was revealed and it looked good. Dare I say, it surpassed everyone's expectations with its computing power and with Metroid running at 120 frames per second. It was Switch, but much better, which was literally exactly what everyone wanted. Everyone was immediately hyped, but something strange was in the air. It was a bit weird that Nintendo didn't disclose the console price during the Direct. And then, the news hits us. $450 for the console, $90 for Mario Kart. And suddenly, the Switch 2 was the worst thing that ever happened since the prohibition. YouTubers started to jump out of manholes demanding a boycott. Thousands of people were spamming Nintendo's live streams asking them to drop the price. Gamers were angry and they were not going to take it. The price was unacceptable. The Switch 2 released and it broke every single sales record ever. What? What do you mean people are buying it anyway and validating this predatory practice? That can't be true. These Nintendo fans, they are going to make everything worse for everybody because they are buying the console. Fastest selling Nintendo console ever, almost 6 million units in its first month. Double what the original Switch sold, and the Steam Deck didn't even think of coming to rescue. Nightmare scenario, heavy rain starts pouring. And things are not looking good in the broader gaming industry as well. Both Sony and Microsoft have also announced pricing increases in the past few months, with Xbox first-party games going up to $80 starting this holiday season, and Sony coming quickly behind it. $80 games are here to stay, and there's no escaping it. Rumor has it, GTA 6 could even break the 3-digit price tag. So, the talk of the town circles back to our suspects. Is it me for not boycotting, for allowing these companies to charge me $90 for Mario Kart? Is it Nintendo because they're greedy and evil? Nintendo, Sony, Microsoft, they only do these things because the consumers allow them to, they say. As we all learn in high school economics, supply and demand explain everything. If you just vote with your wallet, then magically everything becomes affordable, developers stop working in crunch, and the rain stops. Cute theory. Bad detective work. The pricing increase sucks, of course it does. Gaming has always been inaccessible as a hobby, and mainly growing up in Latin America, I have seen this up close. If this increase will hit hardworking people in the US, be sure that it will hit much harder people in the global south, where a single AAA game will now cost almost half of a minimum wage. It sounds irrational, right? How can these greedy companies get away with it? At the end of the day, their business, their going life is to make games, right? Consumers are the only deciding factor in whether they succeed or fail. They make these games for us, and we want them to be cheaper. We want microtransactions out, we want game passes out. Why won't they hear the consumer, the backbone of the industry? The money that keeps this whole thing standing comes from us. Except, it doesn't. Not really. These are all open capital companies. They are not making games for us, dear stranger online. They are making games for the shareholders. I had a good friend that had been a private eye for way longer than me. I talked about him in the channel before, and his investigations could help with the mystery at hand. He's called Carl, and Carl will definitely say that Nintendo isn't greedy or wicked or mean. Nintendo isn't nice either. Nintendo is a corporation, an open capital corporation at that, and the first people that it must always answer to are its shareholders. Shareholders that don't really care how or why, they just demand growth. Infinite growth on finite resources. Calling these companies evil or greedy is to miss the mark, because that implies that there is a way for a company to succeed in a business without enforcing these practices. Profit and demand for infinite growth is a defining factor. It's inseparable from the structure corporations are embedded in. Corporations don't exist to make good games. That's a subproduct, a possible result. They exist solely to increase profit indefinitely. The $80 price tag is not unethical, it's expected. It's a direct result of the system in which they were created to operate in. Saying Nintendo is evil is like blaming a storm or a bee for following their nature. Corporations don't operate in your moral binary. Their operating system is growth. Endless growth. The goal is to raise a profit, and that is a goalpost that always increases exponentially and must be reached in whichever way necessary, even if it's unsustainable. According to Polygon, in May 2024, more than 10,000 people had been laid off in that same year. Studios are shrinking or shuttering, projects cancelled, and investors are getting nervous and demanding more and more results. Polygon writes that layoffs have outstripped any past year, and analysts describe the gaming industry as overhyped and under-demanded. During the pandemic, the investment from venture capital in gaming grew insanely. We were spending all of our time inside, and we were looking for distraction, and investors and capital funds saw a lot of potential in this industry that could hook us to a product and entertain us for hundreds and hundreds of hours. Brand loyalty and consumer retention that doesn't exist when you go to the cinema to watch a 2-hour movie. There was a lot of money put into gaming companies, and now the shareholders want back what they have invested. And they want more and more and more, and even if you have an incredibly profitable year, the board of directors expect that next year will bring even more profit. These are open capital corporations. They don't make games for us, they make games for shareholders. Good game is a byproduct, more profit is the product. All of these revenue increasing strategies that we all hate, microtransactions, gachas, season passes, and DLCs, they exist to maximize profit of something that would otherwise be a one-time purchase. Say you try to be a nice company, a company that cares about your game, and you refuse to do that. Investors will jump out, you will not have the power to compete with all the other companies who decided to comply and swallowed a huge chunk of the market. Then you are either purchased or merged by the competitors, or you are left to die in some dark alleyway in this dirty town. Because in this city, the ending for all industries is the same. It's monopoly. And while I'm arguing that Nintendo isn't evil, it's just a company, I'm definitely not saying that it's nice either. This tweet passed by my timeline a while ago, claiming that Nintendo is one of the only game companies you don't hear horror stories about the work environment from. You constantly see articles about how their staff receive annual pay increases, they don't crunch, they don't have mass layoffs, which is absolutely false. It's always the same around these parts. A Kotaku article states that the practice of crunch, overtime, and night-long work to deliver games has been common practice in the company, lovingly nicknamed Mario Time. In an interview, former Nintendo planner Motoi Okamoto tells a story from the Super Mario 64 DS days. In those days, Miyamoto would come to us at 11 PM after he finished all of his board member work and say, "It's Mario time." At that point, we would start a planning meeting that would run until 2 AM. At that point, Miyamoto would go home, leaving us with the words, "You should return home soon for your health." Over the next 2 or 3 hours, we would write the game design documents and summarize the instructions for our artists and programmers. But that doesn't make Nintendo evil or nice. Nintendo isn't a person, and it most certainly isn't your friend. Nintendo is a company that by its very nature must grow more this year than last year, whether that is achieved by increasing prices or cutting down the workforce. As Carl would say, as capital grows, it necessarily disempowers workers. For shareholders to accumulate wealth, there needs to be an accumulation of poverty, suffering, and privation on the working side. In other words, whether it's Nintendo or Microsoft or whichever studio, the system pushes exploitation and cost-cutting, usually, very usually, at the cost of workers. Is it just a coincidence that we are seeing these practices get more and more common after this sudden boost in venture capital investment that happened during the pandemic? We don't need sharp deduction skills to understand these companies have an expectation of billions of dollars that were deposited on them by these funds, and they need to find ways to pay back. And these billions are going to their competition too, and it's eye for an eye with them. And to a good detective, not believing in coincidences is how we solve mysteries such as these. Because believe me when I say, no one hates microtransactions and crunch culture more than the developers in the video game industry. The workers are the real victims here. If you join this industry, I have to believe that you have at least a little bit of passion for video games. You honed your craft, you learned the theory, and these developers know games as a service go against every single user experience design and game theory best practice they ever learned. But we've all had a bad boss in the past. The order comes from top down, from the board of directors. How can you say no? I think the most clear example for me is Rocksteady with Suicide Squad killed the Justice League. They didn't simply hit their head and forgot how to make a game. This studio has incredible designers who created one of my favorite gaming series of all time, the haunted house storytelling immersion of the Arkham series, that immersed you in, yes, rainy streets, but with a completely different feeling, although as gothic as. Predator, movement, story, these games are probably ranking with the best Batman adaptations of all time. Did they just decide to randomly abandon all that to pursue live service because they're evil? Mean? Because they don't like what they do? That is an unbelievably naive take, and is one that I have seen floating around the internet, mostly pertaining to another series that is really close to my heart, Pokémon. If this is the first time you clicked on a video that I made, well, hi, welcome. I don't usually use green screens, and also, you should know that I talk a lot about Pokémon around here. And even in the realm of Pokémon, there was our own little drama about the absolute state that the industry is in. GameFreak released a trailer for a new Souls-like RPG set in post-apocalyptic Japan called Beast of Reincarnation. The visuals were gorgeous, lush environments, Unreal Engine, AAA polish, far beyond what fans expected from the studio, mostly when you put it side by side with Pokémon games. I have watched a mildly successful video on YouTube here that I don't really want to spew hate against, but I think it is an incredible summary of these surface level takes and I can't help but address it. This video defends the idea that GameFreak must absolutely hate Pokémon, and that they are purposefully boycotting it.
They don't make bad Pokemon games because they lack the skill. They do it because they hate Pokemon, and they don't want to make it anymore. And they hate you for making them make Pokemon games. Pokemon is rotten to the core. Down to every last detail is laziness. It is not ignorance. It's not lack of skill. It is laziness. Just look at the new designs. They don't even look like Pokemon anymore. Look at Sojourner. This fits better in a cartoon than it does Pokemon.
This person seems to be a big Unova fan, and it's hilarious to me that their criticism of Sojourner is the exact same criticism people made in 2011 towards Vanillite and Clink. Time is cyclical, but not to drift off, this video argues GameFreak hates making Pokemon, hates the fans, and deliberately sabotages their own franchise, out of malice. They made Dexit out of malice, sabotage Sword and Shield to feel like corridors, and make lazy designs because they don't care. I believe that this video is a really prime example of what I'm addressing here. The belief that companies make business decisions out of morality, wickedness, ethics, instead of business reasons. Where does my investigation lead me then? Why have the same dev teams that released Pokemon looking like this managed to put out Beast of Reincarnation looking like this? Well, dear stranger online, our shareholder problem gets turned up to 11 when it comes to Pokemon. Because it's not just the gaming industry, it's the most profitable media franchise in the world. Beast of Reincarnation is just a game. It doesn't have over 1,000 of marketable trademark designs that it has to adapt with care and faithfulness to ensure that a consumer base can relate and consume every single one of them. It doesn't need to carry forward a 30-year-old transmedia ecosystem that includes the Pokémon Company, the Pokémon Company International, GameFreak, Creatures Inc., Nintendo, global licensing partners, TCG schedules, anime beats, toy pipelines, worldwide launch windows, localization across a dozen languages, except for Brazilian Portuguese, I guess. Beast of Reincarnation doesn't have a hard release deadline with an entire industry around its back. It doesn't need to hold in its back a competitive scene while at the same time having characters that are unique enough that they will be marketable to children and adults alike. Beast of Reincarnation might look nice, but for the shareholders, it's just a dim streetlight in a corner. Pokémon is the full moon. That's why the windows in Lumiose look like PNGs, because the Pokémon Company will not sell plushies of windows. I can guarantee you that most of the time spent on developing a Pokémon game is spent on the Pokémon themselves, which are the real backbone for the rest of the profit machine. Making sure they are brand compliant, plushable, fit for animation, because the game attends for only 20% of the profit of this franchise. 80% comes from merchandising and licensing. I guarantee you, and now I'm talking to the creator of the video we just watched, no developer sends their CV to work at GameFreak if they don't love Pokemon, if they don't love games, if they don't love telling stories. Most of the people who started working at GameFreak in the past 10 years are people who grew up playing these games. They know what's working, they know what's missing, but at the end of the day, it's work. It trains us, it has top-down decisions, and it subjects us to the wills and desires of the shareholders. The games feel half-finished and rushed not because of lack of passion or individual greed or wickedness. It's because of the superstructure built around it that demands that all of those things are overlooked. Because it is more profitable to overlook them. The less time they spend on polishing window renders, the more time they spend promoting a new design in a fun marketing campaign. And what really bothers me is that this personification of companies, the idea that there are good ones and bad ones, this hyper focus on the ethics of it all, is really reductionist because it prevents you from seeing the whole picture. That the problem is not buying or not buying a thing, your individual choice of boycotting this or that game influences so little in the actual outcome. The problem is the framework. It's to adapt or to die in an open capital system, just like Microsoft buying every single indie studio you ever loved. At the end, they will all end up doing those practices because a system of infinite growth demands them to do it. Or to crunch, or to raise gaming prices. It's adapt or die. And what happens when we try to create games outside of the framework? That's when we get people like Toby Fox, who built Undertale almost entirely on his own, and continues to release Deltarune on his own pace, with free chapters first, then paid ones, not because an investor demanded it, but because that's how he wants to tell the story, and he created basically a cult following over what is, yes, a piece of art. We get Concerned Ape, who built the success of Stardew Valley by himself and is still supporting it after nearly a decade with free updates, simply because he loves the community that formed around his game. What? You paid $10 for his game like 10 years ago? Don't worry, you are still getting more and more stories and free content to play. And of course, Silksong, a game that my timeline cannot stop talking about for months, one of the most expected releases of the year. $20. What makes these creators different isn't just talent, it isn't because they're nice people, it's structure. They own their work. They made enough money already to live very comfortable lives until the day they die. They don't have massive payrolls or shareholders demanding infinite growth. Their teams are small, their scope is manageable, and their profits go directly back into their own projects. That independence gives them the freedom to treat their games like passion projects instead of service platforms. It's proof that there is another way to make games, a way that is led by creators. But that's, of course, only if we leave this wicked little town. Hope only exists outside of the structure, because deep into the streets, only a tiny few outsiders can survive. They can never grow, and they can never spread. Maybe they could, in another place, in another time. A place where it was actually the workers who owned, let's say, the means of production. A crazy place where it would be artists and game developers the ones who would be receiving the full value of their work instead of some unknown shareholders. But surely I must have had too much whiskey to think of something as unrealistic as that. Because in this city, the rules are the rules of the capital. And it's not just games that are slowly dying and getting taken over by microtransactions and battle passes. Music is also dying, with streaming withholding all profit from artists and making it basically impossible for independent musicians to stand up on their own. Streaming is killing cinema, turning it into content, making it so that I have to have 6 different subscriptions to watch the things that I love. It killed cable, just to become cable again. This is a wretched place, I tell you. Social media, the internet, it's dying. It was once a place for hopes of a better tomorrow, of self-expression, of connection, of activism. Now, just meant for endless debates, rage baits, a never-ending Jubilee episode that makes us anxious, angry, feeds on our attention span, and makes us feel terrible. What do these things have all in common? Under which framework are they operating? Are they answering to the same people that the video game industry is answering? There are ways to fight back, you know. Pressure and negative feedback are still valuable weapons and should be taken into account when public shaming companies. It cannot break the framework, it cannot bring this city to the ground, but it shows results sometimes. With the intense backlash to Pokémon Scarlet and Violet's performance, I've never seen before Nintendo refunding games as they did. These developers know that they release an unfinished product from top-down decisions, I don't doubt. But nevertheless, they do feel shame, and good PR is still essential in keeping the facade of this town standing. In January 2024, out of the blue, we got a sudden epilogue for Scarlet and Violet, the Patch-Around episode, for free. And it came really unexpectedly, and it felt even dislocated. It's not common for GameFreak to do things like that. A few months later, another free update was released. The performance update for Scarlet and Violet, which made the game run butter smooth and fixed a lot of the performance issues that it once had. Both the Patch-Around episode and the performance patch were free, while most of the Switch 2 upgrades we got for other games, Mario Party and Zelda for example, were both paid performance updates that came with extra content. People online have argued that it could be likely that the original plan for Scarlet and Violet was to originally charge $10 for both the Patch-Around episodes and the performance update. But probably due to the public pressure and bad PR for releasing Scarlet and Violet in that state, GameFreak decided to hand both of those for free. It's just speculation, but I think it fits really tightly with the plans Nintendo had for this new console release. The fact is that even with boycotts, pressure and backlash, this city still stands. It's still raining outside. And after all this investigation, dear stranger online, if you ask me, who do I think is killing the video game industry? Between the deep fog of this town, I see the shape of a cold-blooded killer. And it's a serial one with many victims. Because there is a pattern here, and there are chalk lines everywhere. Why are all your hobbies being ruined? Why is it so hard to enjoy anything anymore? Why are the songs you love not playing on the radio? Why is cinema being taken over with reboots and remakes? Whose interest does that serve? Where does this money go? If people are as unsatisfied as they are, how can this company still make money? How can Silksong, the most hyped game of the year, cost $20, while GTA 6 will climb to the hundreds? Is our killers the villainous of devs, the wickedness in the heart of Rockstar Games? Is our killer lack of passion? Is our killer the individual moral fault of one single person or one company? No, dear stranger online. Our killer is more powerful than you can imagine. Someone who in this town always gets away with murder. Our killer is